became an apostolic, most edifying podcast in the world. I'm here today with Abuna Noah Hanna. Thank you, Abuna, for coming onto the podcast.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
So before we get started, we'd like to get to know you a little bit more, who you are, your little background about you. So give us a quick bio.
So not long ago, I would be able to tell you I'm the youngest priest in the diocese, but I think I missed that by 2 priests now. So Abuna Jonathan and Abuna John comes after me. They both come after me. I was ordained about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago. Background, I was serving at St. Presbyterian Church in Dallas for about 5 years. And then before that, I used to live in New Jersey for 14 years. And before that, I lived in Egypt. So immigrated when I was about 17 and then went to New Jersey, from New Jersey to Dallas, and from Dallas to priesthood.
So a question I like to ask all of my guests is a little bit about like their faith background. So all of us in the Coptic Church, especially those of us who grew up in the Coptic Church, there's a very big temptation to kind of just go about your faith like in and out, just kind of like going through the motions, not really taking it seriously. And for a lot of us, there's a moment or a period of time that kind of like gives us that conviction, plants that seed for us to make that change, to take the faith more seriously. What was that moment or period of time for you?
I always used to say the same thing, which is I got very sharp turns in my life at certain points of my life. Immigration was definitely one of them. I always say in the United States, you need to be really, really close to God. You cannot live midway. In Egypt, the environment, the society kind of encourages, righteousness, I guess, of some sort, because all the society is following the same norm. Here, the society, you could go both ways. You could go very far away from God, or you could go very close to God, and it needs to be a choice. But the society is permitting any sort of life that you want to live because of the freedom that we have here in the United States. So at 17 years old, that was one of the things I realized very quick, that if I'm not very, very close, I cannot just live borderline. I need to have a very strong relationship with God. So that was one of the ones. When I got married was another sharp turn, and when I had my children was another sharp turn in my life for sure. So that's when I could remember it got me much, much closer.
So like you mentioned earlier, you were ordained a priest just over a year ago. First off, congratulations.
Thank you.
Secondly, what was that shift like for you? Of course, being a priest is a huge responsibility, and you have to shepherd the flock and guide the people. What was that like for your own personal spirituality?
Oh, I'm still, I think, trying to get my head around it. In a year, I don't think you get the full depth of it. But for my own spirituality, it's no longer a personal decision that you're only impacted by. It's also something that reflects on many, many people. So my spirituality doesn't become only my choice or like my own kind of how would you say that? I my only personal choices of being close to God or not. It is also a reflection on many, many people. My spirituality, it reflects on the decisions that I make in the church, on how people see a man of God living their life as well too. So everything I have to make, every decision that I have to make, my own spirituality as well too, needs to reflect that as well too.
So you talk a lot about making those decisions and making sure that it reflects God's image in you. How are you able to make those decisions with peace, with the peace of God, knowing that you're making those right decisions and you're not really doubting, or maybe you are doubting every single decision you make? What is that kind of like for you to kind of take on the peace of God in your life?
The peace that you get is that you're never gonna ever make something that will baffle God, that God will look at it and say, oh, I don't know how to get you out of that one. The peace comes from knowing that God is the Pantocrator. He is in charge of everything, and he can direct everything. And I always like to give the example of driving and taking the wrong turn. And God is a great navigator. He can always recalculate and redraw the map and gets you back to wherever you're supposed to go. So knowing that, knowing that God is at hand and He is there looking at everything, at the big picture, and He can guide and navigate you to go back to the right path. That takes a little bit away from the pressure, or I guess the anxiety that you have to deal with, dealing with different people, dealing with different personalities, and becoming, if not doing the right decisions, becoming a stumbling block, which is something that always comes to mind as we make decisions as priests.
How do you define the peace of God?
How do I define the peace of God? Peace of God is it is long lasting. It is not a temporary thing. It is from within, and it's not artificial. It is not it's not psychological only, because there is a lot of that. You could go to a vacation, you would feel at peace. That part is psychological. Or you could go to a place, a lake, and it's nice and calm, and you feel that peace. That is not what the peace of God gives you. The peace of God gives you that long-lasting, everlasting feeling that you're always being taken care of. That no matter what you do, God is there, and God is going to guide you through it. And whatever you do, God will make it prosperous as long as you love God, as long as you have Him in heart and in mind.
So in your own life, as you grew up, and obviously you mentioned that your immigration, you mentioned getting married, having kids, as all turning points, as well as entering into the priesthood. How has God's peace manifested itself to you in those moments and throughout your journey?
As I reflect on my journey, coming in 17 years old, not knowing a lot about the language, the culture, everything else, having the first steps of learning the culture and learning the language and working a full-time job and applying to college, that peace through that whole anxiety of different things that we're dealing with, that peace that no matter what, I still have that same God that was in Egypt, the same God that was here. Same liturgy that I used to attend in Egypt is the same liturgy I attend here. And it's one thing that always gives me peace. Every time I felt, I'm going through a lot, liturgy was always a connection point. It's one of the things I also advocate, the different languages, and the Coptic specifically, because no matter what, even when I came to the United States, the Coptic part of the liturgy never changed. So every time there was, through the intercession that we say in Coptic, in the Brisvea, and all the different hymns that was said, that I could always close my eye and I could imagine myself just as, at home, same as at home. And every time I traveled abroad as well too, whether it's different countries, that was always a connecting point. Whenever we prayed in that Coptic, no matter what, even if the rest of the liturgy was in different language, there was certain parts that you could remind you always of home. So, same God that got me through school in Egypt and the tough time in Egypt, the same God that got me through the immigration part, applying applications, working, college at the same time. And I always went with a verse that said, "Whatever you do, do it wholeheartedly, as for the Lord, not for men," because it is from the Lord that you will receive the inheritance. So when you know that you're working for God, you're not working for men. You're not under the mercy of someone's judgment, whether or not they like you or not, whether or not you're doing what they want you to do, and whatever pleases them. As long as you have in mind that you're working for God, that's what matters. And that's what got me through multiple hardship, whether in college or marriage or with kids or whatever it is. You're always working with God.
So when you talk about that synergy of us working with God and the peace that comes with that, I think a lot of times in our lives, especially here in the West, we feel like that we're against God. We feel like that the lives that we live, it's like God is like anti-fun. God is anti-this, anti-that. And so we almost put ourselves in like a haram halal mindset of like, this is right, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong. And we forget that God like plays that working role in us. So how can we, because it's not a very peaceful thought to think God is going to send me to hell if I do this or do that. So how can we kind of shift that mindset a little bit and realize that it's not about what we do or don't do, and it's more about our life with God? What are steps we can do to shift that mindset?
So the more you focus on what is right and what's wrong, the more you're gonna feel it's more of a prison with rules and stuff. But the main thing with our relationship with God is love. You want to love God, everything will fall in place. You start with loving God, and then everything else, all the sacrifices that you need to do will come in naturally. It will come in naturally that you want to spend more time with Him, so you don't have time to spend doing other things. It will come naturally that you give up certain things in your life. I get the questions a lot from high school. Oh, is it right or wrong to do this or do that? Or how about that specific scenario? What if I did it this way? And it's always like a lawyer looking for a loophole, right, within the law. But that's not what God wants us to do. God doesn't want to put a law and then you can find your loopholes of how you can live your life freely while still being in good terms with God. God wants us to love Him with all our hearts, all our minds. And then with that, the peace will fall in place. And then with that also, what we're supposed to do will come in very naturally. It wouldn't be artificial, and you wouldn't have to think it or to be able to force yourself to it. So it starts with loving God. And as you love God and grow deeper in that love, then everything else falls in line. There's a story by Abu Nabshoy Kamel. A beautiful story of a lady that was not. She was raised in a private school. Her parents very liberal upbringing and everything, and she would not be dressed appropriately for church sometimes, having revealing clothes and stuff like that. And Abuna was thinking so much whether or not he would address her, and he decided, Abu Nabshoy Kamel, that he would not address that situation. But then because she was in private schools, she was very fluent in French. So he then asked her to start translating books to French. I don't know if he needed the translation or not, but he just asked her to do that. And as she was translating the readings that she was doing, and in the process of translating, it changed her heart. And then little by little, she realized, she came to him one time and said, I don't know if what I'm wearing is appropriate for the church. I don't know if what I'm wearing is right thing. And that came naturally just by her developing that relationship with God. So my answer to this is always love God from all your heart, from all your mind, from all your understanding, and then everything else will fall in place.
Mm. You mentioned loving God with all our hearts and all our minds, and building that relationship with Him.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no better way to do that than prayer.
Yes.
So what are times in your life where prayer was that vehicle for peace? You know, how did you kind of use prayer as the peacemaker in your life?
Prayers has different forms. A lot of time when we think of prayers as one type of form, but prayers has a lot of things. You're coming to liturgy is a prayer, and you're standing in front of God in an official way, closing your bedroom and standing and praying. That is prayer. You're sitting and working and lifting up your heart and saying, God, get me out of this, or I don't know what I'm doing, or whatever. That's prayer. There's a lot of forms of prayer. Thanksgiving is prayer. Praise is prayer. Hymns is prayer. Sometimes we put it in one corner and say, this is the only way to pray. This is the only way that God will be listening to me. But then how are you going to be able to achieve pray always, right? So prayers for me took different shapes at different stages of my life, different depth as I grew. Liturgy was always a big thing for me. I was always a liturgy person. Liturgy is always, attending liturgy always made me feel at peace. But my personal prayer with God, took different turns. As I grew, Thanksgiving became much more apparent. As I was younger, it was much more of a, I have this urgent need, and I'm praying for this and praying for that. But then as I grew, I developed that prayer is that state where I'm in connection with God, that I'm talking with Him and spending time with Him, and it's that quality time. And it turned into that one-on-one, you know, someone that you love so much, and you're closing the door and you're finally getting to have that one-on-one with him, and just that presence. And you know, Saint Anthony, there's a beautiful story. I always like to say stories, so don't mind me if I use a lot. But Saint Anthony used to be visited by 3 people, and every year there would come those 3 people. 2 of them would ask him questions, and 1 would not ask question. And year after year, so one time Saint Anthony asked him. He said, "How come you never ask me any question?" And the answer he said, "It's enough that I look at your face, Papa Anthony. It's enough that I see your face." It's that peace that he gets from just seeing Saint Anthony's face. And you get to that level. You get to level of, I just want to look at him. That is by itself is a form of prayer as well too. Just staring at his picture, talking with him, and just seeing his face, getting that one-on-one with him. So that's part of that prayer that leads to thanksgiving. There's a verse in Philippians that is very direct in terms of the connection between prayers and thanksgiving. It says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving." So prayer, supplications, and thanksgiving. "Let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus." So it's a direct link between prayers, thanksgiving, and supplications that we give to God, that then the peace will come, and that trust that He will. It's not a matter if or not, that He will take care of it. That's it. I've lifted to Him, and it's that peace of mind that it's now in His hands, that He can take care of it.
I agree 100%. And I think that the part of that you mentioned was thanksgiving. And that by giving thanks to God and by realizing the abundance of the blessings that He has given us in our lives, that is the first way for us to connect with Him. And because I think a lot of times, like you said, like when we're younger, it's like, oh, I need God now. You know, like we put Him in the back pocket, we pull Him out, almost like a wallet. We pull Him out when we need Him, put Him back away.
Yes.
But in reality, God is always there, and we always need Him. We just don't realize it. And I think that like Thanksgiving is one of those things that allows us to access that part of our heart to really know God. There's a book called what's it called? I forgot what the book is called. If I remember, I'll put it somewhere on the screen. But in the book, it talks about like deep prayer with God, and that like how like breathing itself can be a prayerful action. Like if you sit and you focus on your breathing, you focus on like the prayer of the inside of the heart. You control the like all of the noise in your head and all the noise around, and you just sink into prayer with God, and you become like, you really just try and connect with Him as your being, as your essence. Like there's a power in that. There's a huge power in that. And a lot of times we just think prayer is just, God, I need this, God, I need that. When in reality, there's so much more to it.
Yes.
So my next question is, for people who struggle to even pray about things that they want or things they need, what are ways that they can take, or what are steps they can take to kind of take that step towards prayer, to take that next step of finding that peace of God in prayer?
Well, it helps if you can articulate beforehand, before you do your prayers, what you want to pray about, what are the priorities, who you want to pray about. It helps that you have a list of people that you want to pray for as well too, because the responsibility could also be a motive for prayers. If you feel the responsibility of other people asking you to pray for them and requesting certain things, someone who's sick, someone who's struggling with addiction or with any other sin in their life, and you have that list of prayers, that is, by itself is a motive. There's one thing we're trying to start in our church, is to get the elder to have a list of letters of people, so that they don't know the names of the people that they're praying for, but they will just first letter of the first name, last name, and give them a list of names so that they can pray for as well too, for the senior people in our church. And by doing that, first we're giving them purpose as well too, that they're praying for someone, but also that they see the result of the prayers as they cross out the letters of the people that they're praying for, so then they can feel the achievement that they've done through their prayers. So having a list or having a note and writing down exactly what you want to pray for and the different struggles that you went through the day. That can give you a purpose and it can give you a conversation. And also, we need to keep in mind that it's not going to come natural. We're going to need to put some effort. We're going to need to force our minds to stay with God. In Isaiah, it says, you will keep him. He was talking, God will keep him, a person. You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. So God will give us this peace when we force our minds to stay on him, to focus on him. So it's going to take some effort to guide our minds to be thinking a certain way as well too, and to have that mindset of continuous prayers. Like I said, when we put it into the corner of I'm standing at this official prayer, starts, ends by this time, that's one thing. But when I know that prayer is the status of me connecting with him, checking in with him all the time, and being in that state of always lifting up my heart and connecting and talking with him, then when I put it that way, then it is it's different. You look at it differently. I'm not saying we don't pray. We still need to pray, close our rooms and pray at the end of the day and the beginning of the day. But that connection, continuous connection with God, this is where we puts us into that mindset of praying that leads to peace.
And I think that next step following, like finding peace in prayer, is finding peace in suffering.
Yes.
Because it's the like oxymoronic nature, the paradoxical nature of peace in suffering.
Yes.
So can you share, if you want, a personal story where you found peace within your struggle, where God gave you the grace and the peace to, pass through the struggle?
Well, like I was saying, some of the hard turns sometimes that comes in our life, that makes us change focus on what we are and what we're working for and what life is through tribulations like this. I've had a daughter that went to heaven. I had she was stillborn, so she was born dead, and that changed my life dramatically. It made me focus on much bigger things. It was right around when we moved to Texas, so when it happened, it gave me that hard turn of my life. What am I working for? Where are my priorities? Where is life? And it gave me a close check, I guess, on it could happen to all of us. It's not so far. Death is not just for the elder or the seniors or whatever. Death is very real. It could happen to me. It could happen to everyone else. At that point, I've had not lost anyone from close family members. So when it happened to my daughter level, it shook me. And then it made me focus on different things. So that was a turning point in tribulations. And you can choose what tribulations would do. You could choose to make it a reason to stay away from God. You could choose to make it something that will direct you back to God. You could choose to make yourself angry at God or whatever it is. But I chose that this would be, God had picked someone from my family. So I'm in close contact with God. God is right there. It made me feel that God is within my family. He's right there, because something like this would not happen without God's permission, for sure. I knew that. So when I knew that God had picked from my daughters to have one to be living with him in heaven, I said, okay, God is much, much closer than I thought. And that made me realize I need to get my relationship with him much, much closer.
So how do you reconcile that pain that comes with that suffering and the peace that he gives? Because a lot of times the majority of the time it's like, there's that hurt inside of you, that pain inside of you. How do you move past that and accept the peace that God wants to offer?
Well, realizing that it's through tribulations that you're going to see the hand of God. Truly, it's through the hardest time that everyone else around you will be looking at you, seeing how you're dealing with this. How can you even get past this? But then you see God is working through all the details, and his hand is right visible. It's through this hardship, it's through these tribulations that you see God very clear, not like any other time. So with that, then comes the peace that you get. With that, then you realize it's much more bigger than you. It's much more about something that's completely not just me, not just him, not just all that. It's God. It's God that is controlling that peace. Also, when you realize that people around you might give you some peace, but it's not going to stay with you. And they might comfort you with some words, but it doesn't last for so long. Then that directs your vision towards, well, where else can I get that peace? Where else can I get a true peace? Because when you're hurting so much and nothing is comforting you, you're going to be motivated to look for, okay, how am I going to get myself comforted? How can I get myself that peace I'm looking for? And that true peace, then this is when you find it in your relationship with God. And when you taste that peace, then you never want to let go of it, because you've tasted it personally. It's not something that someone else described for you. It's not something that you've heard in a sermon and once or twice. It's something that you felt, that you touched yourself, and you don't want to let go of that. That's why I said it's very, at the beginning of the talk, I said it's very important that we know that true peace, He is the King of peace. That's why we say, oh, King of peace, establish us your peace, right? And we ask for that peace, and we know that the true peace comes from Him.
Yeah. It reminds me of Job. And
Yes.
how Job, no matter what, was always at peace with what God sent. And no matter what the people said around, no matter what even his own wife said, like, it was God, and that was it. That's all that mattered. The only important thing was his relationship with God.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot for us to learn from that, especially in our suffering. So what is your advice to people who are suffering or who are going through things, or they just don't know how to put that pain away? What is your advice to them to take that step towards healing, to take that step towards having that peace?
Start establishing a relationship with God. Start looking for how you can start this, how you can start tasting that peace that we're talking about, that everyone's talking about, the peace that comes from God, and start establishing some sort. We go to counselors, we go to doctors, we go to friends when we're hurting, but sometimes the last person that we want to go to is God, and closing our room and starting a conversation with Him. Start that conversation, even if you don't know what to say. Start any conversation with God, and God will look for any opportunity to manifest Himself, but God will never push Himself into anyone. If you're not looking for Him, if you're not seeking Him, He's standing by the door and He's knocking. Can you open? Would you open? If you open, He will come in and He'll give you that peace. But you need to be able to show Him that you're willing to open up the door. Sometimes we are looking everywhere, and the last person we want to go to is God. But it's in the middle of that tribulations that this is when the invitation is right there, and He's knocking loud, and you just need to open up the door.
I think it's a perfect way to end it. So, is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
No, I would say, looking back at my life, I would say the earlier you start to have a relationship with God, the more in depth you end up growing with Him. So I invite everyone to start early. Don't wait until you're older. Don't wait until you have kids. Don't wait until you have families. Start tasting that. I feel that with everything that's happening in our society, everything is becoming much more fast-paced. We're dealing with a lot in a very short period of time, whether it's COVID, whether it's diseases, whether it's wars. This generation is dealing with a lot. So I feel there's big need to have that peace and to seek that peace and to truly open up the door and let God manifest Himself into our lives and start that relationship with Him.
Thank you, Abuna.
Absolutely.
And thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications. See you guys next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect.